because silence online creates uncertainty. And I think this is very underestimated by many professionals. And when people are making a high stakes decision, uncertainty can be enough to make them keep searching. So that's why Google isn't just a search engine. For professionals like you listening to this episode, it's also a trust engine. I'm Sylvia Garibaldi, founder and CEO of a well-established marketing training and done-for-you services company, tailored specifically for the modern legal and financial professional worldwide. While it's taken some trial and error to figure out which methods get the best results for professionals who are looking to grow their practices, fast forward to today, my team and I have nailed down and perfected a process that has helped so many of our clients consistently achieve outstanding results and create a legacy for their practices. I created the Serve First, Sell Later marketing podcast to give you simple, actionable, non-salesy, and results-driven marketing to grow your legal or financial practice like so many of our clients have. If you're a lawyer, mediator, financial, or divorce professional who is looking to become highly visible and wants to create a practice that makes an impact, then you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 137 of the Serve First, Sell Later marketing podcast. I'm your host, Sylvia Garibaldi, and if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the podcast by hitting the follow or subscribe button so that you don't miss future episodes packed with actionable strategies to grow your practice. So we are now at part 3 of our 4-part series on the recommendation engines that help you grow your practice. So in part 1, which was episode 134, we talked about your clients, and the question there was pretty simple. Will your clients recommend you? Because the experience you create for your clients has a direct impact on what they say about you, whether they refer others to you, and whether they become advocates for your practice. And then in episode 136, which is part 2, I talked about your professional network. So those are your referral partners. They could be lawyers, mediators, financial professionals, therapists, accountants, coaches, CEOs, HR executives, and so many other people who already have relationships with the types of clients that you want to serve. And so the question there was, will they think of you and refer you when the right opportunity comes along? So if you haven't listened to those first 2 episodes yet, then I encourage you to go back and listen to them. And we'll actually put the links in today's show notes because every recommendation engine builds on the one from before. So today I'm moving to recommendation engine number 3, and this one is Google. So the question we're asking today is, when someone searches for the kind of help that you provide, will they find you? Because I want you to think about how people behave today. Someone might have been referred to you by a friend or another professional. And so what's one of the first things they're likely to do? They're going to Google you, right? Or maybe nobody has referred them at all. And then they simply have a problem and start searching for answers. So they may type something like divorce mediator near me, or workplace mediator for executive conflict, or maybe family lawyer for complex financial divorce. And then suddenly Google becomes part of that decision-making process. But here's the important part. Showing up on Google isn't just about ranking number 1. It's about what people find when they search. So for example, does your website clearly explain what you do? Does Google understand what you're known for? Are there reviews, maybe some articles? How about professional profiles, speaking engagements? So many other signs that show someone that you're credible and experienced, because Google isn't just a place where people discover you. It's also a place where they decide whether you're worth contacting. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to look at how potential clients actually use Google when they're searching for professional help, why some professionals are much easier to find than others, and what you can do to make sure your expertise is showing up when the right people are looking for it. Because recommendation engine number 3 comes down to one very simple question. When someone goes looking for exactly what you do, will they find you? So let's get started. So I want to start with something that I think a lot of professionals overlook, and that is Google is doing two jobs for you. One is it's helping people discover you, and it's helping people decide whether they trust you. And those are two very different things. So let's take a look at the first one. Someone has a problem, they don't know who to call. Of course, they go to Google. They might search workplace mediator for executive conflict or divorce financial specialist. And in that situation, they don't know your name yet. They're searching for a solution, right? And if your website, your Google business profile, your articles, or other online information clearly match what they're looking for, then Google has a better chance of putting you in front of them, right? There's a second side that's just as important. And this one happens after someone already knows your name. So maybe a colleague referred you, maybe a past client recommended you, maybe they heard you speak, maybe they came across your LinkedIn. So what do they do next? They're going to Google you. And now they're not searching who can help me. They're actually searching, should I call this person? And that's a completely different search because they might type your name. They could type your name plus your profession, your name plus reviews, your name plus your city. And so now what's happening is they're looking for reassurance, right? They're looking at what appears, your website, your LinkedIn profile, your other social media platforms, your reviews, podcasts that you've appeared on, maybe professional directories, speaking engagements, maybe even what other organizations are saying about you. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to get a fuller picture. And this is where I think professionals sometimes underestimate Google because even if most of your business comes through referrals, Google still plays a role. That referral may get your name into the conversation, but Google can help determine whether that person actually picks up the phone. So think about it this way. A referral gives someone a reason to look at you, and Google gives them a reason to either feel more confident or keep looking elsewhere. So here's a simple question I want you to ask yourself. If someone Googled your name today, would what they find support the reputation that you've worked so hard to build online? And would they immediately understand what you do, who you help? Would they see signs of credibility? Would they feel like you're active, you're current, and you're established? Or would they find very little? Because silence online creates uncertainty. And I think this is very underestimated by many professionals. And when people are making a high stakes decision, uncertainty can be enough to make them keep searching. So that's why Google isn't just a search engine. For professionals like you listening to this episode, it's also a trust engine. It helps people answer two very important questions. One, can I find this person? And once I do I feel confident contacting them? And that leads us to the next issue, which is even if Google finds information about you, does it actually understand what you want to be known for? Because if your online presence is too broad or too vague, what happens is it creates another problem entirely. So I want to take this one step further, okay? So let's assume someone goes to Google and searches for exactly the kind of help that you provide. So, the question becomes, does Google actually understand what you do? And more importantly, does it understand what you want to be known for? Because this is where I think a lot of professionals run into some challenges. Their website says things like experienced, trusted, client focused. And there's nothing wrong with any of these words, but they don't tell Google very much. And honestly, they don't tell a potential client very much either. Because if I land on your website, I should be able to understand very quickly, who do you help? What kind of problems do you solve? What kind of work do you want more of? And what makes your practice different from the dozens of other professionals offering something similar? So let me give you a quick example. Suppose you're a mediator. Your website might say mediation services, and that's accurate, but it's incredibly broad. You need to compare it with workplace mediation for executive and employee conflict, or divorce mediation for high conflict parenting and complex financial matters. So, getting very granular and more targeted about who you help and how you help them is absolutely important because those descriptions give Google much more context. And they give the person searching much more confidence that they've landed in the right place. And so the same thing applies to lawyers. If, for example, your website says family law or divorce, helping couples divorce, that covers a lot. But maybe the work that you really want is complex divorce involving businesses or significant assets or complicated property issues. And if that's the case, your website needs to say that. And this is a gap we find all the time. In fact, one of the biggest issues I see with a lot of professionals is that their messaging and positioning is off. And I can tell you that when that is off, many things will complicate the search. And you know it isn't clear when you're always attracting the wrong prospects. That's a gauge I always use. Are you attracting the right clients, the right prospects? And if you're not, then there is a gap. There is a problem in potentially the messaging and positioning. So it's really important to think like your client for a moment and not a lawyer or a mediator and not like someone who knows the terminology of your profession. So you should always ask yourself, what would the person who needs me actually type into Google? They may not search alternative dispute resolution practitioner, right? They may search, can mediation work in a high conflict divorce? Or, for example, they may not search employment conflict resolution professional. What they may type is, how do I deal with serious conflict between two senior employees? So, the list can go on. And so that's why the language that you use matters, because your website needs to reflect the language that your clients and referral sources actually use when they're looking for help. So here's one of the simplest exercises that you can do. So make a list of 5 or 10 questions that you hear most often from potential clients. They could be questions that people ask you in consultations. They could be questions that referral partners ask before they send a referral to you. They could be the problems clients describe in their own words, right? And so those questions should show up on your service pages, maybe in articles, FAQs, and videos, in your LinkedIn content, because the clearer you are about the problems you solve, the easier it becomes for Google to connect with the people searching for those problems. And here's another benefit. Clarity helps people self-select. If someone lands on your website and immediately thinks, that's exactly what I'm dealing with, you've already made the decision easier for them, right? So this isn't really about stuffing your website with keywords. It's about being specific. It's about using language that people understand. And it's about making sure that there's no confusion about what you want to be known for. And I can tell you honestly, when I look at the websites of many professionals, I see huge gaps in their hero section, in the service pages of their website. So when we do write website copy for our clients, we see that gap. And that is so important to fix it because this is what Google is picking up. It's what it's looking for. So you need to make sure that all of the messaging is aligned, because once you know what you want to be found for, then you'll know exactly what you should be creating online. So I think that's super important to start by answering the questions that people are already searching. So once you're clear about what you want to be known for, the next question is, what should you actually be putting online? And this is where I think things can get a little complicated because professionals think they need to come up with clever content ideas. They think they need to constantly invent something new. They think they need to sound like a marketer, but you don't. One of the best places to start is always with the questions that people are asking you. So think about your consultations. Think about the emails that you receive. Those questions are content. So think about how you can actually use those. So for example, someone may ask the question, what's the difference between mediation and arbitration? And so those are all things that people are typing into Google, and it's super important. Another quick example is if you're a workplace mediator, maybe people are asking, when should HR bring in an outside mediator? Or how do you know when workplace conflict has gone too far, right? And so another quick example, if you're a divorce financial professional, people may be asking, what happens to the family home? Or how is a business valued in divorce? So these are not just good content topics, these are signals. They tell you exactly what your audience wants to understand. And the more useful you are in answering those questions, the more opportunities that you create for the right people to find you. So, this is why I don't want you writing content just to say that you've written content, right? So, you've got to be very specific. For example, you're writing an article. You don't want to publish another generic article called 5 Reasons to Hire a Mediator or Why Choose Our Law Firm, because that's not necessarily what people are searching for, right? Instead, answer the real questions, the uncomfortable questions, the questions that people are asking before they're ready to call you. And please make sure that you're eliminating any legal jargon. And also, don't assume that every answer has to become a long article, for example. Like one question could become a short blog post. It could be a LinkedIn post, a video. So when you're creating content, think about it in that regard, because Google is going to be searching these pieces of content that you have online. So here's a really practical exercise. If you write down 10 questions that you hear all the time, look at your website. Have you answered any one of those questions on your website? And if the answer is no, then you already know that you have some new content ideas to cover, right? I hope that makes sense. I want to share something with you that I see come up time and time again. Many professionals I speak to know exactly who they want to attract, but where things break down isn't clarity, it's actually implementation. So they're not sure how to translate that into messaging, how to stay visible, or how to turn that visibility into actual client inquiries. So if this sounds familiar, I created a step-by-step guide to help you work right through this. This free guide walks you through how to define your ideal clients, identify the right referral partners, understand where they're actually looking, including AI, and most importantly, how to turn all of that into consistent action. You can download your free guide at www.sgandassociates.ca/free-guide. Link is also in the show notes. All right, let's talk about another important part of Google that can make a really big difference, especially if you serve clients in a particular city or region, and that is your Google business profile. So, this is the information that can appear when someone searches your name, your firm, or a service in your area. And for many professionals, it's one of the first things that a potential client sees. And they may see your location, your website, your phone number, your hours, your reviews. And all of that starts shaping the impression of you before they ever visit your website. So I think the first question is pretty simple here. Is your Google business profile complete and accurate? Does it clearly describe what you do? Are you using the right business category? Is your website connected? Is your location or service area accurate? Because if Google is trying to decide whether your practice is relevant to someone searching nearby, obviously those details matter and they matter a lot. But I also want you to spend a little bit more time on reviews, because reviews are incredibly powerful. So think about your own behavior. If you're choosing between 2 restaurants, 2 hotels, or 2 service providers, what do you often look at? The reviews, right? And so obviously professional services are no different. Now, of course, lawyers, mediators, and other professionals have to be mindful of confidentiality, professional rules, and what they can or can't say publicly. But from a potential client's perspective, reviews provide reassurance, and they can help answer questions like, did this person communicate well? Did they make people feel heard? Were they responsive? Did clients feel supported? Like, all of these are important questions. And so they're not always about technical expertise, right? They're often about the experience that connects directly back to recommendation engine number one, right? Your clients. And so the experience you create can influence the reviews that they leave. And so those reviews can then strengthen what people see when they search for you on Google. So that's how these recommendation engines really start working together. And here's something else to think about. You don't necessarily need hundreds of reviews. I think what matters is that the reviews that you do have feel genuine and they're current and they're consistent with the experience that you want your practice to be known for. And if someone leaves you a review, respond when appropriate and, not with confidential details, of course, and not with information about their matter, but do respond to it because simply acknowledging the review and thanking them can show that there's a real person behind the business. Okay. Now, if you've never paid attention to your Google business profile, here's something very simple that you can do. So Google your name and your practice and then see what comes up. Look at your profile as if you were a potential client. And I want you to ask yourself, is the information current, right? That's important. Does it reflect the work that you actually want to attract? Are there any reviews? Does the overall impression make you feel confident? Because local visibility is not just about showing up. It's about what someone sees once you do, right? And so your Google business profile and your reviews are two of the clearest signals that someone can use to decide whether they want to take the next step and contact you. But Google doesn't just look at what's on your own website or business profile, right? It also pays attention to what exists about you elsewhere online. And that's where outside credibility becomes equally important. And so I want to switch to that section now because there's one more thing I think is important for you to understand about Google, and that is your website matters, your business profile matters, your reviews matter, but Google is also paying attention to what exists about you beyond the things that you can control yourself, right? And this is where outside credibility becomes really important. So let's say your website tells people that you're an experienced arbitrator. That's useful information, but now imagine that Google also finds a professional association profile or a conference page that listed you as a speaker, or maybe a podcast episode where you were interviewed, or an article that you contributed to, right? Or a media mention. So all of these things gives Google a fuller picture because it's no longer what you're just saying. It's not about what you say you do, it's what other sources are reinforcing. And from a trust perspective, that matters. So think about how we make decisions as people. If someone tells you they're excellent at what they do, you might believe them. But if you also see that they've been invited to speak, interviewed, quoted, published, recommended, maybe included in respected professional organization, your confidence level goes up. And I think the same principle applies online. This is why I want you to think beyond your own website and ask yourself, where else does my expertise show up? If someone searched my name, what would they find besides the pages that I created myself? So would they find evidence that I'm active in my profession? Would they see that other people value my expertise? And so this is where the first two recommendation engines that we already talked about starts to connect with Google, because your clients can leave reviews, your professional network can invite you to speak, and you could be interviewed on a podcast. They can include you in an article. Let's say, for example, you are on a podcast or even your professional network asks you to speak and they say, hey, you can include an article as well, right? All of these things are important. And so when they write about you, they can include you on their websites. So super important to be found on these other sources. And all of these things create more evidence around your expertise. And that's why these recommendation engines shouldn't be thought of as completely separate, right? They actually strengthen one another. And so a great client experience can lead to a strong review. A strong professional relationship can lead to a recommendation for a speaking opportunity, or a speaking opportunity can create a conference page with your name and expertise on it, right? See where I'm going with this? And suddenly, when someone searches for you on Google, they don't just find one website. They actually find a body of evidence. And that's what builds authority. So if you want to strengthen your Google presence, don't only ask, how can I improve my website? I want you to also ask, how can I create more credible places online where my expertise is being demonstrated? Because The stronger your digital footprint becomes, the easier it becomes for someone searching your name to see that you're established, that you're active, you're credible, and you're trusted. Now, let me switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the mistakes I see professionals make when they're trying to get found on Google. And the first one is trying to be found for everything. Okay. And I see this one a lot. We write for clients' websites, we look at their messaging and positioning on their website, and we see this frequently. A lawyer handles 10 different areas of law, or a mediator works across family, workplace, commercial, and estates disputes. So, what they're doing is they're trying to make their website speak equally to all of it. And the problem with that is when you're trying to be known for everything, it becomes much, much harder for Google and for people to understand what you really want to be known for. So I want you to ask yourself, what is the work I want most of? What are the cases or clients I want to attract? And is that obvious from my website? The second mistake I see is being too vague. Words like experienced, trusted, strategic, client focused. I mean, those are all overused words. They sound good, but they are overused and they don't tell Google very much because they don't tell a potential client very much either, right? So if you want to be found for workplace mediation, say workplace mediation. If you want complex divorce files, talk about complex divorce situations. If you work with high net worth clients, say that because it really matters. It's important to be specific. The third mistake is creating generic content just because someone told you that you need content for SEO. And I think we're going to see even more of this now because AI makes it so easy to produce articles really quickly. But here's the thing, more content doesn't automatically mean better content. If you're publishing the same generic information that 50 other professionals have already written about, you're not giving someone much reason to choose you. Your best content should always come from your own experience. What are you seeing in the work that you do? What mistakes do clients make? What questions are they asking? The fourth mistake is ignoring geography, right? For many professionals, location still matters. If you serve clients in Toronto, New York, Sydney, or a particular region, make that clear. Don't assume Google knows exactly where you work or who you serve. And also, don't assume that your potential client will dig through your website trying to figure it out. So make it easy. And finally, one of the biggest mistakes I see is treating a website like a one-time project, right? You build it, you launch it, and then you don't touch it for years and years. I look at websites a lot, and I can tell certain lawyers have not touched their websites for many years because it's so outdated. And the reality is, your practice changes, maybe your focus or niche changes, your positioning changes, the questions people ask can start to change, and the way people search changes as well. So your website needs to evolve with your business. So I want you to remember this. SEO is not about tricking Google, and it's not about stuffing keywords into every paragraph. It's more about making sure that your expertise is easier to understand for Google, especially, and for people using Google to find someone like you. So be clear about what you do, be specific about who you help, and answer the questions that people are asking. And of course, keep your information current. Now I want to give you a very simple way to see how well you're doing. And it's something that you can do in less than 10 minutes. And I call it the Google test. This is a really simple way to see what a potential client or referral source or maybe a colleague might actually find when they search for you. Okay. So here's what you need to do. I want you to open a private or incognito browser window so your own search history doesn't influence the results too much. And then start with the simplest search. Type in your own name. What comes up? Is your website there? Your LinkedIn profile, your Google business profile, articles, podcast appearances, professional directories, speaking engagements, reviews, all those things. Now look at those results as if you had never heard of yourself before. What impression would you get? Would you understand what this person does? Would you know what they're known for? And would you feel confident contacting them? Okay. Here's the second search I want you to do. In the same window, type in your name plus your profession. So maybe it could be Jane Smith, family lawyer. It could be Sarah Jones, workplace mediator. And again, look at what comes up. Does the information reinforce the work that you actually want to be known for? Or does it feel scattered or outdated or unclear? Okay. So now I'm going to make it a little bit more interesting for you. I want you to search for the service that you want to be hired for, plus your city or region. Okay. So you could type something like high net worth divorce lawyer, New York City, right? Or divorce financial specialist, Vancouver, or family estates mediator, Sydney, Australia. Do you show up? And if you don't, who does? And take a look at the professionals who are appearing. What are they doing that you're not? Maybe they have clearer service pages. Maybe they have more reviews. Maybe they have better messaging and positioning. So you can really learn a lot just by paying attention to who Google is already showing. And finally, search for the problem that your ideal client might actually type into Google, and not your professional title. I mean the problem. So it could be, how do I resolve conflict between two senior executives? Once you do that, I want you to ask yourself, do I have anything online that answers that question? Is there an article, a video, a podcast episode, a service page? And if the answer is no, that tells you something, right? Because your potential clients may already be searching for those answers. The question is whether your expertise is there when they actually do. And so this is why I call it the Google test, right? It takes this conversation out of theory and you actually get to see what the market sees. So this is why it's important that your messaging is clear, your positioning, your expertise is visible, and you can also find out where the gaps are. All right, let's move on to the next section here because I want to leave you with 4 simple things that you can do. First, decide what you want Google to associate your name with. What is the one area of expertise or type of work you want most to be found for? And second, make sure your website clearly reflects that, right? If someone lands on your site, they should immediately understand who you help, what you do, and what you want to be known for. So third, start answering the real questions that people are searching. We talked about that. And finally, build credibility beyond your website, right? Look at those reviews, those speaking engagements, the articles, the directories. You don't have to do this all at once. You just need to start with the biggest gap that you've identified in the Google test, because the goal isn't to be everywhere on Google. The goal is to make sure that the right people can find you when they're looking for exactly what you do. All right, I want to wrap up here and quickly say that I want you to remember this. Google is not just about rankings. It's about whether the right people can find you when they're looking for exactly what you do. And once they find you, whether what they see gives them enough confidence to take that step. All right. So if you're listening to this and realizing that your expertise isn't showing up maybe as clearly as it should, you did the Google test and you're like, uh-oh, I think there's a few problems here. Or maybe you're not being found for the kind of work that you want most. This is exactly the kind of thing that we can look at together. So on a strategy call, we can look at your positioning, your online visibility, and where the biggest gaps may be between the reputation that you've built and what people actually find when they search for you. So if this is you, you can find a link in the show notes to book a free strategy call. Okay, so next week, we're moving into the 4th and the final recommendation engine in this series. And this one is changing incredibly quickly. And I believe it's going to have a major impact on how potential clients discover, evaluate, and choose professionals in the years ahead. So make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss that episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.